Most of you know from my last video that I have been going through my scrap situation and cleaning things up, making a bunch of pre-cuts. One of my pre-cut rules in that video was to be sure and set aside strings. Who doesn't love a string quilt, right? It was so hard for me to focus on finishing up all of my scrap situation because I kept thinking about a string quilt. And you know, when you're thinking about it, you have to make it. So that's what I did. This is the Sewing Channel, and I'm Tracy. If you've been with me for a long time, or if you're new, I'm glad you're here. I'm going to share with you not only how I made this string quilt block, but how I made some magic happen in the sashing. Enough talking already. Let's get busy making some sashing magic. For this magic string star block, you will need 16 squares at 7.5-inch square. Look to the left-hand corner of the screen to see how many blocks you'll need for that particular style to make this star. To make the magic sashing block, you'll need to find the center from corner to corner on your square. Mark on the right side of the fabric 1/2 inch from center on both sides. I lined up the middle mark on my 1-inch measurement on the corners and then made my line from there. You can see in the left-hand corner what this block will end up being in the end. Leaving the center of this block exposed is the goal. Now let's mark our blocks for our star point strings. On this block, you're only going to mark one side. You should have 4 with exposed middle sashing and then 8 with 1 mark on them. And don't forget about the 4 background squares to finish up your star. When I think of string quilts, I think of anything that is under 2.5 inch in width. And in this string quilt, we're using all the different widths. Now, the size and width of your strings will determine on how many different strips you will be placing and stitching onto each one of your blocks. When I don't find the right color in a string that I have, I go right to my 2.5-inch wide strip pile. The first thing I do is lay the strips out in color order that I would like them to be seen. To give mine a shaded look, I went from dark to light with my coloring. The first strip is laid right side down, right along the line that you made on one of the sides. If your strip is covering corner to corner, then you probably have it laid right. Now it's very important to note that this very first strip, your 1/4-inch seam has to be dead on. That will ensure that your magical sashing is perfect throughout your entire quilt. Next, bring it over to your pressing station, flip it over, and give it a good hot press. Now I did press after each strip was attached. Pressing after each strip will keep things nice and neat. And since I had disappearing ink, I had to remark the other side of my block. In order not to erase my mark again, I'm going to go ahead and attach the other side down so I don't have to worry about it. It's the same way, right side down, right along that line. And you have to make sure you have a dead-on 1/4-inch seam allowance. After stitching it down, bring it over and give it a good hot press, and you see magic sashing right down the center. Now let's get to putting the rest of these strips on. Line up the edge of the next strip along with the strip that you just sewed on. Right sides together and then sew a stitch right along that edge. I want to note that each seam allowance here and thereafter going toward the corner of the block does not have to be a 1/4 inch. So just relax and sew them on. Make sure that last string covers up the whole corner of your quilt block. Once the one side is done on your magic sashing block, then it's time to build on the other side. Continue to stitch and flip each string and make sure to press as you go. This magic sashing block is very versatile. You can make this any size that you would like. Now it's time to trim the block down to 7.5 inches square. There's a shot of the back there. You can see all of the stitch lines. You may be asking yourself, well, why couldn't I just use one skinny piece of white fabric in between all of those colors? Let me answer you with this. Whenever you're working with really skinny strings of any size width, stitch lines can become skewed and crooked. And it's also worth noting that you only have to make those first marks on the block, and the size of the block takes care of the rest. And also, it's fun to see that sashing magically appear when the block is done. So you see here I'm working on all of our star points, and I'm lining it up right against the mark that we made, right side down, stitching it at a 1/4 inch for sure. Remember, that's important. And I stitch and flip each individual string and press it after each stitching so that it lays nice and flat. When it was all said and done, the 7.5 inch squared block, I ended up using approximately 3 to 4 strings on each side of the block. Next, I trimmed off all of the excess just like I did on the Magic Sashing block, and it left me with quite a few little scraps, which I will totally use to make confetti strips. I happen to have a full tutorial on confetti strips on my channel. Now you don't have to arrange them the way I did into a star. You can do different things, like how about into different squares? How about a pinwheel? Treat them just like half square triangles and you'll come up with all sorts of things, like the friendship star. How about all different colors into a square? Or you can just use the vision that I had and make this absolutely stunning, drop-dead gorgeous quilt. Final measurements on this quilt block is a whopping 28 inch by 28 inch quilt block. That's big, friends. I chose some videos for you to watch ahead of time. They're on the screen right now. Up your quilting game today and click them. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.